Hey everybody, great to have you back here in the fish tank. It's time for our monthly chat about the Minion Masters Meta. That's right, it's time. And if you're new here and you're not subscribed yet, make sure you smash that subscribe button so you keep up to date with all things Minion Masters. So just very quickly, as I've done for the last 6 months, year, I'm not sure, I constantly scrape the leaderboards. At the moment we're doing it once every hour. Do some image recognition on that, and then we have a nice big spreadsheet of all the data, and we will see what we can glean from it. We'll look at the masters, the cards, the decks, stuff like that. And for the first time ever this time, we're going to look at draft data as well. Now, adding draft data was a little bit of a pain because of the way that there's some mistakes on the way it's displayed in the game, where you have the guild logo on top of the last card. But I've got the image recognition working pretty well for that, so we should be able to do that. So reminder, this is the leaderboard meta. We don't have access to any other data from the devs with regards to overall play rate, win rate, anything like that, but we glean what we can from the leaderboards. Right, so that's what we're going to do today. Let's start finding out. Right, so as always, the first thing we're going to do is have a look at master popularity. Which are the most played masters, which are the least played masters. This is a little graph that shows overall which masters are being played. So I mentioned that we're going to look at draft. Draft is going to be sort of a thing that we look at on its own. When we look at this group data, this is just for the ranked modes, solo, random, and pre-mates. Right, so what do we need to remember about this month? Remember, we've had the new bridge rules, which may or may have not have affected certain cards and masters in different ways. So, this graph shows a combination of the three modes. Yellow is 1v1, red 2v2 randoms, and blue is 2v2 pre-mates. Put them all together, and you can see that, of course, as always, APEP is the #1 played master. Expect some nerfs in the form of the timers for the perk 1 and perk 3 for APEP in the next patch. But yeah, APEP dominant overall. Second, Tronvir. And third, Stormbringer. Last season, Stormbringer was second. Stormbringer's dropped off quite a lot this season. Not sure specifically why. Perhaps Wartrack got the nerfs. A lot of people were playing Wartrack with Stormbringer, and we'll have a look when we get to the cards at how popular Wartrack is or isn't. Spoiler, it is. So potentially that's been why Stormbringer's dropped off quite a lot. So Stormbringer, Setsu, and even APEP have seen reductions in their play rate. Valorian, Morelia, Milloween, Rekt, and a little bit of Mordor overall seeing an increase. But still, APEP dominating, and the top three, they've changed with regards to their order, but they're still the same as before. Right, so that's overall. Let's break it down per mode, and we have a look at the top solo masters. We've got the two graphs, as always, on the left, 2.4 last season, on the right, 2.5 this season. And we can see APEP in solos is still the master of choice, but big reduction in play rate. And from speaking to our good friend Disu, he seemed to think that APEP and Wartrack were played a lot together. So if there's less Wartrack, he expected there to be less APEP, or at least that's a potential way to explain the difference. So APEP, big reduction in play rate, but still the #1 master. And we can see, so this season, APEP, Valorian, Diona, and Rekt as the top three. So APEP dropped off a lot, Tronvir a little bit, King Puff also, and I think that might be potentially down to the bridge changes. It does affect King Puff. It makes certain situations way more difficult with the trick swap to get value out of it. But of course, what goes down, something has to come up. Valorian seeing a bunch more play, also Milloween, Diona, Rekt, and Volkos. So APEP's dropped a lot, and a lot of the other masters have taken up that slack. Average mana cost hasn't really changed, and if you're new to the game, we always say if you're building a deck, have a look at an average mana cost between 3 at the lowest, sort of 4.5 at the max. Obviously there's some outliers, but if your average mana cost is between that, you've probably got a decently flexible deck to deal with things. Right, so that's the solos, APEP dominating. Let's have a look at randoms. So randoms, last season it was Tronvir, APEP, and Stormbringer. This season it's APEP, Morelia, Tronvir, and then Stormbringer. So Stormbringer dropped off a lot in randoms. Same with Tronvir. Did Tronvir get any nerfs? I don't think so. Setsu dropping off as well, and of course the big winner in randoms was Morelia. And it'd be interesting to see when we go on a little further, does the increase in Morelia reflect an increase in a curse decks? Because those two go together. Right, so Morelia, Milloween, Mordor, a little bit of Rekt, a little bit of Valorian as the increased play rates. So Apep, the #1 master, taking over Tronvir, who dropped off a lot. If you got any ideas why that might have been, let me know. And as we look at the bottom there, average mana cost hasn't really changed. And then we close out the master section by looking at our pre-mades. Remember, pre-mades in the latest patch, no wildcards anymore, and you must have 20 unique cards. So that means you and your teammate cannot share a single card. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about that? I think most people that I've spoken to are okay with the wildcard removal, not necessarily so okay with the 20 unique cards, especially with the game not really reflecting the UI in the game not really helping you to understand why you've got these invalid decks. Right, so last season 2.4 on the left, Stormbringer, Tronvir, Ratbow. This season in pre-mades, Tronvir, Apep, Stormbringer. And if we look at the changes, Setsu dropped down a lot. Same with Stormbringer, Ratbow a little bit. And the Ratbow might be explained if Wartrack's falling out of favour a little bit. A lot of people like playing those faction-based decks. Right, so we saw Apep's play rate drop off in the other modes, but in pre-mates here, Apep has gone up. Seen the biggest uptick of all the masters, followed closely by Tronvir. Also seeing some more Mordor out there. So, Tronvir in pre-mades is the master of choice at the moment. I do feel like maybe it's a little bit too strong. I do feel like the Wind Rune is a little bit too strong. It does kill a lot of stuff, but then you can kind of counter-argue that you only get that once every 3 cycles, unless you're using his new alternative perk, which will be coming in the next patch. We're not going to talk about that today, but that'll be interesting to see how that changes things. And if you're not up to date with the new alt perks coming, check out my video that we did recently. Okay, so normally that would be the end of the Masters, but this month we have the Draft Master popularity. Now, of course, things when we're looking at draft compared to ranked, it's not quite the same because we have more restrictions. You can't choose exactly what you want, but if we have a big enough source of data, then we should get at least some usable results. And Tronvir, hugely the #1 master here, followed by Apep, Valorian, Morelia. And if you play draft, I think that would probably seeing a lot of Tronvir there. If you pick Tronvir at the start of your draft, then you know that's 10 wins at least. And also reminder, in the last patch, draft actually received some proper matchmaking based on the number of wins and losses, or maybe just the number of wins, whereas before there was no matchmaking at all. Right, average mana cost a little higher in draft than in just regular solos, because you don't quite have the luxury of choosing exactly what you want. Right, let me know in the comments, do you like the addition of the draft info? And we'll have a look at draft cards a little later. Right, next up we have the rarity composition, where we look at the makeup of the decks based on the rarity of the cards, common, rare, supreme, or legendary. This is always a good thing for newer players to see. There was a discussion in the Discord recently where somebody thought there should be a limit on the number of legendary cards you can have in a deck, which I can understand from a new player's point of view. But if we look here at leaderboard decks, you can see that legendaries only make up a fairly small portion of the decks. And as always, most of the cards in most of the leaderboard decks are common. The most basic cards, the easiest to craft, the easiest to get, the easiest to unlock. So if people think this game is pay to win, this kind of is the argument against that. I know newer players struggle against legendaries, but it's not just because they're legendaries, it's just because they're not basic cards. They have different mechanics that the players need to understand. You can't just throw stuff into them like you can. previously. Right, so not really much changed there, but some has changed when we look at the factions. Remember, factions in Mini Masters we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you can see last month, overall, Scrap faction was dominant, and that's basically because of the Wartrack Dreadnought that was in every blooming deck. So we can see this season that Voidborn has gone back to number 1, which I think it was previously. So Scrats have dropped off quite a lot. Stoutheart a little bit. So Scrats dropping off because of the Wartrack nerfs. Stoutheart, I think, dropping off a little bit because of the Woodsman and Bolf. Definitely because of the Bolf nerfs. Accursed is the big winner here. The dark green, third most played overall. There's a few reasons for that. I think Accursed is more viable because of just the things that counter it getting weaker. We've seen Rystar get some nerfs. Now the Wartrack's got some nerfs. The Stoutsman's got some nerfs. Stoutheart Woodsman, Stoutsman, I'll take it. But also with the new bridge changes, the Skeleton Crew is a real winner. We're seeing a lot of people use that card because you can actually take a bridge with it, even if they're going to walk back. The skeleton that's furthest is far enough on the bridge and slow enough that it's got enough time to cap the bridge, and that's one of the real winners when we're talking about cards that have got stronger with the new bridge changes. Right, so overall, top 3 factions: Voidborn, Scrap, Accursed. Break it down just a little bit with the different modes. We'll have a look at solos, randoms, and pre-mades as always, and then we've got the comparative graphs for last season underneath. So let's have a look. Accursed has gone up in solos, Scrat's dropped off. Accursed has gone up in randoms, Scrat's dropped off. And Empyrean's gone up quite a lot in pre-mades, and again Scrat's. So Scrat's the real loser with regards to their faction being represented on the leaderboards, which, as I said, it's primarily because of the Wartrack being nerfed. Are the nerfs enough? Probably not, based on our experience this season, and the cards we'll see how they're performing in a little bit, and the fact that the current PTR has some more nerfs for it. So Voidborn, Scrat, Slither, top 3 factions in solos. Scrat, Accursed, Voidborn in randoms, and Scrat, Voidborn, Empyrean in pre-mades. Right, wildcards. Back in the day, you could use wildcards in all modes. Wildcards were removed quite a long time ago in solos. That's why we just have those green, those fully green, useless pie charts, but I like to include them to remind ourselves. And now we have no wildcards in pre-mades. Randoms is the only mode you can have wildcards in. You could argue, well, you can have wildcards in draft, but they're slightly different in draft since each card takes up its own slot, how it used to back in the day. Right, so randoms. We're seeing more people wildcarding in randoms. Maybe they're missing out on their wildcard fix in pre-made, so they're playing it in randoms. I say more, I mean more people are double wildcarding the red one, less single wildcarding. And then if we have a look at which are the most wildcarded cards, we've got Skeleton Crew, as I mentioned before, and that's both in terms of Accursed decks and outside of Accursed decks. And Skeleton Crew is 4 times more wildcarded than the second place card, Arcane Ring, Spirit Vessel, and Mana Chaser. Right, let's get on to the cards. Right, top cards. So this is the top cards overall in the top 3 ranked modes. So if the card's got a black border like the Wartrack Dreadnought, that means it hasn't changed. If it's got a green border like Swarmers, it means that the rank has gone up since the last time. If it's got a red border like the Propeller Scrats, its rank has gone down compared to last time. And if it's white, it means it's a brand new card. The number on the top left of the card is its current position, and the number on the top right is its previous position. So Wartrack Dreadnought last month was first, this month is always also first. So we can see that the Dreadnought is still number 1. Swarmers, Elite Swarmer up there. Daggerfall going up quite a lot. Curse Bearer, Chain Lightning, Plasma Marines, Propeller Scratch, Slitherbound. A lot of familiar faces up there. We can also see Chief Icebreaker Bolf there in 15th dropped down from second last time. Remember, he had some balance changes, got that new icebreaker keyword, but lost true damage. So the biggest increase in play rates overall, we've had the Shield Guard of Light, Zealots of the Burning Fist, which of course received the extra buff in the last patch where the remaining one gets the Spirit. Cleaver's gone up quite a lot, which is probably because it's just a replacement for Chief Icebreaker both. And as mentioned, Wartrack Dreadnought still the #1 card, but it's also the card with the most reduced play rate. So #1, but played a lot less than it was before. Chief Icebreaker Bolf, second with the reduced play rate. Bridge Buddies dropping off as well quite a lot, which is probably because of the bridge changes. And as we mentioned about the different rarity of the cards, we don't see a lot of legendaries, especially in the top cards. And if we look here, we only see 2 legendaries, and that is Wartrack Dreadnought and Chief Icebreaker Bolf. We've got 3 Supreme, 8 Rare, and 14 of the top cards are common. And there was 1 card out of all of the ranked data that we got that was unused. Let me know in the comments. Hit that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments which card do you think was not played 1 single time in either solos, randoms, or pre-mates. There's only 1 of them. See who can guess what it is. Right. So those are the top cards overall. Let's break it down a little bit and have a look at the different cards based on the different modes. So again, 1v1, randoms, pre-mates. Top cards, this time we're excluding spells. We'll look at the spells separately because they're, when you're building a deck, you're kind of building it with a certain number of minions in mind and a certain number of spells in mind. So it makes sense to split those up. Right, so non-spells, that means anything that's a minion or a building, basically. And we can see Wartrack Dreadnought still cringe #1 in all 3 game modes. So solos, top 3 cards, we've got Dreadnought, Swarmers, and Slitherbound. Even though Slitherbound's got a little nerf, hasn't really changed too much. Randoms, we've got Dreadnought, Elite Swarmer, Cursebearer coming into its own with regards to dealing with big units, which you tend to find a lot more in 2v2s. And pre-mades, again, Wartrack Dreadnought, Swarmers, and Elite Swarmer. So a lot of familiar faces in the top 3 of each of those. And I probably should have said earlier that we go through a lot of data here, so if you need to pause the video, screenshot it, whatever you need to do, have at it. So if we look at the winners and losers, the big shakers and movers, the increases and decreases, solos, we saw Bolf drop off a lot and Wartrack Dreadnought. We also saw Zealots coming up a lot and Shield Guard a lot. So potential just replacements for Bolf in the terms of Zealots and the Shield Guard. In 2v2 randoms, Wartrack dropped off a lot, and again Chief Icebreaker Bolf, not really a surprise there. Cleaver coming back as a Bolf replacement, and Skeleton Crew, I did mention that, we see there in randoms #8. We're seeing that played in and outside of a cursed decks, which is quite apparent of its current strength. And then in pre-mades, we'll close this section out. Bolf dropping off again. Wartrack Dreadnought dropping off again. Windwalker Shihu as well. He can still take bridges with his jump, but you can't jump straight over the bridge. So that could have been why he's dropped off a lot. And pre-mades, we're seeing more Spear Throwers, more Shield Guards of Light, and Fanriel, despite Fanriel not being able to take a bridge when he's charging. So interesting bit of data there. Right, so those are the top non-spell cards. Let's look at the top spell cards. Right, so again, the 3 different modes. And we tend to find, as you would expect, when we get to randoms and pre-mades, there's a lot more things to kill. So AoE spells, heavy AoE spells, tend to become more apparent. Things like Magma Storm and Beam of Doom. Even though we do see Beam of Doom as a heavy removal in solos to deal with some clumps of things. Okay, so solos, Daggerfall, Unholy Ground, Morgrul's Mark dropping off quite a lot in solos. Now, it did get a bug change or a bug fix in the last patch where the Swarmers now correctly spawn on the minion rather than on the unit or on the placement of the spell, which makes it harder to take bridges with it. And also the new bridge changes make it harder to take bridges with it. So I think that's definitely reduced the power of Morgrul's Mark. But I think that's healthy. It was very strong. And the grabbing the bridges with it was kind of like, this is not really what the card's about. So it's more down to its core usage now. Getting some units on the back line, excuse me, giving it taunts, and killing those valuable units. Bearavalanche we see in all 3 modes. One of Disu's favourite cards. Very, very strong. Definitely can't go wrong if you're looking to include a card in your deck. And when we see Toll of the Dead in solos, that means that Accursed decks are coming back in solos. They really dropped off when Rystar came into the mix, but looks like they're coming back. Toll of the Dead up to 9th from 29, and you're not going to be playing Toll of the Dead outside of an Accursed deck. So if we see Toll of the Dead, we see Accursed decks. Unholy Ground is likely to get a bit of a nerf in the next patch, I think, because that's again a very strong Accursed spell, but not one that has to be played in an Accursed deck. So if we look at the movers and shakers in solos, Daggerfall's gone up quite a lot, Bearavalanche, Hypnotize, and Morgrul's Mark dropping off, as we said, probably because of that bug fix, as well as the Bridge Buddies as well. So some things kind of making sense there with the data. Always nice when the data reflects what we kind of expect. Makes us feel fairly big-brained. Right. Randoms, top 3 cards, Chain Lightning, Bladestar. Bladestar did get a fix in the last patch where it shouldn't be getting stuck in big units. I've heard some reports that sometimes it still can, but it should still do what you think it should previously do in most cases. I do still think it's a little bit too strong. Maybe should reduce the duration or something. It lasts too long, gets way too much value if you know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, check out my How to Be a Bladestar Legend video. Right. So, Bridge Buddies dropping off a lot in randoms. I think Bridge Buddies are even worse in 2v2 since there's way more things to kill the Scrat. And of course, if you kill the Scrat, you stop the Bridge Grab. Randoms, Harmful Souls going up. Harmful Souls is another one of those cards that doesn't have to be played in Accursed. It's strong enough outside of it, but probably mostly played in Accursed. So that could suggest that some Accursed decks are coming back in randoms. And then pre-mates, we got Bearavalanche, Daggerfall, and Beam of Doom as the top 3 cards. Bridge Buddies again dropping off there. Unholy Ground as well. And Bearavalanche seeing an increase in play along with, as you can see there, Ritual of Servitude, currently number 8, previously 28. So that's gone up quite a lot. So we know there's lots of heavy decks. Right. So, what's next? Let's have a look at the Legendaries. As we mentioned before, you don't need a deck full of Legendaries, but Legendaries can be great if you can build around them. Although some don't necessarily need to be built around. Wartrack Dreadnought, one of the cringe things about how strong it is that people are just throwing it in any deck. Got an Accursed deck? Throw it in there. Got some kind of cycle deck? Got any deck? Throw it in there. So top Legendaries, as we would expect, the Dreadnought in all 3 game modes. And overall, the Wartrack Dreadnought is the Legendary of choice, followed up by Chief Icebreaker Both, even despite his nerfs. But the Wartrack is 3 times, more than 3 times, as popular than the Chief Icebreaker Both. So it's just wildly overplayed. So, Wartrack Dreadnought, Bolf, Reconator, Razor Squadron, and Bar are the top 5 overall. Of course, we can break that down by the game modes, but we see a lot of familiar faces, some heavier cards as you would expect when we get to 2v2, but also some of those in 1v1. Jinglong falling out of favour a little bit. What else do we have here? Taluk's quite heavily played in Slither decks. A lot of people liking him, especially in the tournaments, which we've got one coming up on Saturday. We see a lot of Taluk played or even banned, which is something that we definitely wouldn't have said before. Okay, so movers and shakers, 1v1, Bolf and Dreadnought Musketeer, they've dropped off quite a lot. Bara coming back, Prime Sergeant Radic, and Jinlong seeing some more play in solos. In randoms, Wartrack Dreadnought dropping off insanely. Same with Chief Icebreaker Bolf. Shen Stormstrikes popping off, seeing some more play along with Fergus, Xiaolong, and Nivir the Fallen, interestingly. So that definitely means more Accursed decks. And And if we look into the pre-mate again, I know we're saying the same thing again, but this is what we would expect. Wartrack Dreadnought dropping off, Chief's Viscount Base both dropping off, and Fanriel getting some more play along with Ritual of Servitude. So if you're looking for some legendaries, these are some good ones. Remember, not all legendaries are created equal. Some of them are very deck specific, like the Ritual of Servitude. You're definitely going to want to play that in a big heavy deck. Whereas other things you can just throw in any old deck really and get a lot of value. So it depends, you know, what sort of bang for your buck. Are you looking for a legendary for a specific deck, or do you want something that's nice and flexible? Right, so next up we're going to look at the top cards for draft. And of course, every card is showing us a new card because this is the first time we're covering draft, so we don't have any previous draft data. I was thinking about maybe waiting until next month to add drafts so we had the previous month, but why wait? Let's dive straight in. And we can see some cards here that reflect their rank, how much they're played in rank compared to how much they're played in draft. Wartrack Dreadnought, you know, similar. It's up there. It's number 2. You wouldn't be surprised about that. But of course, you know, draft building the deck comes with restrictions. You can only choose one of the 3 options you're given for each choice. So you can't get exactly what you want. But as I mentioned at the start, as long as we got a decent amount of data, then we should get some interesting stuff. And I thought one of the interesting things was to compare a draft card's rank compared to its rank. So, for example, Border Patrol here, number 1 played card in draft this season, but number 194 out of 290, I think now, played in ranked. So that's a massive difference. So we're going to have a look at the cards quickly here that are played way more in draft compared to ranked, and that's Border Patrol, Bats, Rocket Scrap, Spire Stag, and Cannon Roller. So, like, these are decent cards, but they often get overlooked by the majority of people. And then on the other side of things, we're going to look at things that were played very lowly in draft, but actually are very high on rank. So Lone Wolf, for example, only number 222 out of 290 in draft, but 24th on the cards played overall. I think we're comparing this, if I remember correctly, to solos, which would, of course, make the most sense. I definitely did that. So Lone Wolf, Propeller Horde, Heel Puff, Fanriel, and Bannerman, those cards that are played way more often in draft compared to ranked. And as when we looked at the overall cards, there was 1 unplayed card. Again, let me know in the comments, what do you think that was? There are some unplayed cards in here, but not as many as you would necessarily expect. So we had 255 cards played in draft, but there is a list of 31 cards that cannot be played in draft. So there's only 259 cards available. So that means only 4 cards were not played in draft. And those 4 were Sugarlight Shield, Stormy, Magma Cannon, and Frost Fang Familiar. They were the 4 cards that didn't get played in draft. But I'm surprised almost every card was played in draft. And when we say played in draft, we're talking about appearing on the leaderboard. Right. Let's move on. We've looked at the cards, we've looked at the masters, let's put them together, and let's have a look at the top decks. Now, as we always say, you know, you can argue about what is the top deck without having details of win rates and stuff like that. We can't really grab that. But what we can do is have a look at the deck's placement on the leaderboard. We're going to assume that the higher the placement, the better the deck is. And also, we have a rank for all of the cards. We know, for example, the Wartrack Dreadnought was the number 1 ranked card. So we can average the rank of all the cards. So we can use the deck's placement and the average rank of the cards. And we can put that together. And that can give us sort of a feeler of which decks are good. Which decks have got very highly played cards and are very high on the leaderboard. Now, I've done 5 different masters here just to have a bit of variety. But when I was looking through the top decks, most of the top decks for a long way were APEP or Volko. Right, so the top deck here we see is APEP. We've got the cheap Blood Imps and Heal Puff combo to grab bridges and heal. Swarmers and Netherbats, Lone Scout, Daggerfall as a nice sort of AoE removal. Spell Dancer, we know she's pretty strong, even though she did get nerfed. Wartrack Dreadnought, of course. Beam of Doom to deal with big things. And the Zealots of the Burning Fist. So this deck would probably have had both in before. Zealots of the Burning Fist are a decent replacement for him. Second, we had the Volko deck that we've seen a lot on the leaderboard, which is just heavy aggro. Lots of heavy hitting units. And of course, the Wartrack Dreadnought in there. Third place here, we've got Valorian. Again, we can see the Blood Imps and Hill Puff combo. And I always think it's really interesting when we look at the top decks and we see the Blood Imps. Whereas if you look at decks on lower levels of the leaderboard or lower ranks overall, people would be terrified of using the Blood Imps. But the reason the Blood Imps are great is because they're so cheap. You get multiple minions that can take bridges. You can play them on bridges now. They have decent DPS. And that's all for 1 mana. Of course, you do have the drawback that they have the blood pack, so you can be punished. But the top players will know how to play them in ways that they don't get punished. They'll keep them split. They'll pay attention to their opponent's counters to them. And they'll get value that way. Basically, Blood Imps are allowing you to get something cheap, but it's going to cost you some amount of HP. And you're just trying to not cost too much HP. So lots of cheap cards in all of these decks, as we'd expect. Wartrack Dreadnought in almost all of them. The 5th place deck is an interesting one. This is the Disu deck. We've seen this at number 1 on the leaderboard. And I think this is really just an anti-Wartrack deck. We've got the Red Golem. And remember, you can activate that once you're 1500 HP or below. And of course, you've got the Blood Imps there to help you get down to it. Flightless Dragons, another nice synergy there, because if you're behind on health, they get Rage, and they are beastly. Very weak in terms of HP, but DPS absolutely shreds. So, very powerful deck there, and specifically designed to deal with the Wartrack. The thing about the Wartrack at perk 3 that makes it so annoying is it's difficult to deal with it overall when you consider the health your master's losing if you're tanking on face, the mana that you're spending to deal with it, as well as the XP you're probably losing because you can't get on a bridge because of it. So this kind of deck will just shred the Wartrack Dreadnought quickly and go again. Right, and then we have a Stormbringer deck. Similar kind of things. We've got more range in there, as you would expect. But will that be the same next season? Because remember, of course, alternate perks next season. Stormbringer's getting their alternate perk too, which won't give marksmanship to everything. Again, check out my video on those perks if you're not up to date. Right, let's have a look at the top decks in randoms now. Top 2v2 randoms decks. Again, we've got a selection of masters just to make it not just a page of APEP decks. So again, APEP at the top there. We have a look. Dreadnought, yes. Dreadnought, yes. Dreadnought, yes. Fish deck in the 4th place there. Got up to rank 1 on randoms with that. No Dreadnought. Let's go. Magma Storm's really good at dealing with the Dreadnought. And then we got a Milloween deck. Not kind of an unusual Milloween deck there. Not a huge amount of spells in it, but it seems to be working for someone. So Blade Star, not surprised to see that. We spoke about Magma Storm being a great spell in 2v2s with a lot of things to hit, as well as the Wartrack Dreadnought. It does come with randomness, but if you're targeting it on something that's not going to move, you're probably going to kill it, since there's like 13 or 14 of these magma balls. The big issue with it is if the units are moving, so you do have to take that into account. You know, when you're casting it, are the units I'm casting it on likely to remain in this area for this period of time? Right, so APEP, Tronvir, Morelia, but interestingly, not a Morelia, a Curse deck. And that's one thing we haven't seen on any of these top decks. We haven't seen a Cursed. A Curse seems to be coming back overall, but not really right at the top. But we'll see. Maybe that will change next season. Right, finally, let's have a look at the top 2v2 pre-made decks. So remember now in pre-mades, 1, no wild cards. 2, 20 unique cards required between you and your teammate. And the thing that we can't tell from the leaderboards is that a lot of these decks are designed to work specifically with an accompanying deck, and we don't know necessarily which those are. Right, so we're still seeing both played. Ratbow is the number 1 there, kind of interesting. I guess... I don't know. There's not too much Swarm there, so he's not going to get much value from the Daka. But the Daka is a misunderstood perk. A lot of people think you need to kill a Colossus with the Daka to make it worth it. But you don't. You just need to kill something. It's like a free costs ability, I think. So, you know, kill something, move on, cycle to the next one. And of course, in the next patch, again with the alternate perks, Ratbo has the option to not use the Daka, have the Squeak attack with the Burrowed Scrats instead. So let's have a look. We got DPS in the Ratbo deck in the form of the Assassin. We got Bear Avalanche as a nice clear spell. Probably be played with something with a big spell like a Magma Storm or a Beam of Doom. We got Divine Warrior to tank a lot of stuff. Cringe Wartrack Dreadnought, as always, and Chief Icebreaker both still there. Could play it if you don't have both with a Cleaver or the Zealot, something like that. Right, Tronvir next. Similar kind of deck, lots of cheap stuff. With Zip Sapinator and Chief Icebreaker both for their DPS. Stormbringer, we get a few more ranged units, as you would expect. Not too many tanks in there, so probably plays with a deck that has a lot of tanks to give them some protection for their backline. Diona with kind of a slither deck. We know that Talok is pretty strong, especially if it's attacking something that is immobilized or poisoned. Defenso Chopper's really good. See a lot of Propeller Hordes out there, stuff like that, so Defenso Chopper will eat those up. And then we see a Setsu deck. Remember, Setsu getting a big rework in the next patch. No more spell spam, stun lockdown, so that's quite a big one. And I did cover the changes to that in my latest PTR video, so if you didn't hear about those, make sure you check out that video after this one. Cheap. We got Shock Rock, Bridge Buddies, of course. Setsu at the moment is going to want spells, Morgrel's Mark, Schisma Boomsticks, Crotillery, and the Dreadnought. Right, so if you're looking for some decks, those will give you a good idea where to start. Now, the next section, as always, we're going to go through pretty quickly, and this is a section where if you want to pause it and reflect on it, I encourage you to do so, but we can't really spend too much time talking about it because the video is probably long enough already, and what we're going to look at is the top cards per master. So if you're looking to build a specific deck for a specific master, or this will give you a good turning point. So let's just introduce you to this section. So again, we got 1v1 randoms and pre-mades, top cards for APEP here. And one thing to pay attention to, at the bottom we got a little deck counter. This is the number of unique decks that we've found using this master, so it gives you an idea of if this is a representative amount of data or if it's based on just one person playing one deck. Right, so there we have APEP. Next up we have Diona, lot less decks for Diona. Next up we have King Path, lots of split minions as you would expect to get that perk 3 value. Next up we have Milloween, lots of spells, and interestingly lots of curse spells, especially in 2v2 pre-mades and in solos as well. Right, next up we have Mordor, not many decks, see only 4 decks for solos in Mordor, so not very representative there, but as you would expect, lots of heavier cards in Mordor. Morelia, again, pretty dominant with regards to factions, talking about Accursed here. Next up we have Wrecked, pretty aggro master, so we see some aggro cards in there like the Azog, Fang the Wanderer, Zeppelin Bomber. Okay, Ratbo, we see a lot of Scrats, lots of Scrats cards, Scrat spells, Scrat everything basically. Ravager, we know this is aggro, so things like Dragon Pack, Dragon Ball, Gorax Sacrifice, as to be expected. Setsu will see a lot of spells, and Stormbringer will see a lot of ranged units. We see a lot of Outlanders or Crystal Elves, and Tronvir. Tronvir is really just Tronvir. Play it whatever you want, really. Valorian, we always see a lot of Empyrean cards with Valorian, although there isn't the Empyrean specific synergy that it used to have, but that seems to never go away. Volko, see a lot of Shroom stuff in there. Right, so I know we went through that last section quickly, but if you want to revisit it, go back, screenshot it, whatever. I'm thinking about maybe putting the screenshots of the slides on my website. Let me know in the comments, is that something that you want me to do? Right, okay, I'm back. There we have it. That is our meta-analysis for version 2.5. Whether you're a new player or an existing player, hopefully this should have given you some interesting information based on what's going on at the moment. As mentioned, we've had the bridge changes, we've had the pre-made deck building changes this patch, and then next patch we got the alternative perks. So maybe a lot of things could be changing out there. I do my best to keep you up to date, so if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments. Turn the notifications on so you don't miss out on anything. And that's pretty much all I want to talk to you about today. My name's Bad as a Fish, and I'll see you again soon here in the fish tank.